Rain poured over the broken land as Ethan trudged through the mud, his boots sinking deep with every step. The war between humans and the alien empire had ended months ago, but the scars were everywhere. Burned trees, shattered buildings, and the smell of ash still clung to the air. He had been searching the forest for salvage, anything he could use to trade for food. But that day, he found something he never expected. Under a fallen metal beam, a strange shape shivered. At first, Ethan thought it was a wounded dog. Its fur was dark silver, and its eyes glowed faint gold in the rain. It whimpered like a frightened child. He knelt beside it, pushing the beam away with all his strength. The creature hissed, but it was too weak to move. Ethan reached out slowly, his hand trembling. Its skin under the wet fur was warm, almost too warm. It looked like a predator, with sharp teeth and claws, but right now it was just a dying animal. He carried it home wrapped in his coat. It was heavier than it looked, muscles packed under its small frame. Every step back to his cabin was harder, but he refused to leave it behind. When he reached his door, he laid it near the fire and covered it with blankets. The creature's breathing was shallow, and its glowing eyes stayed locked on him. Ethan wondered if it understood he had saved it. For the next days, Ethan nursed it back to health. He fed it bits of cooked meat, and though it growled at first, hunger won. It began to eat from his hand. Slowly, it started moving around the cabin, sniffing everything. Its tail was long and whip-like, its movements too smooth for any earth animal. When it stretched, Ethan saw faint scars along its side, deep cuts that had only just started to heal. Whatever attacked it was not human. That meant something else was out there. At night, Ethan sometimes woke to the sound of it growling softly at the door, as if guarding him. Other times, it would sit by the window, staring into the dark forest. He didn't know why, but he began to feel safer with it around. He started calling it Vera. He didn't know if it was male or female, but the name felt right. Vera seemed to understand, turning her head when he called it. One morning, while Ethan was chopping wood outside, he noticed strange footprints in the mud, long clawed marks. Much larger than Vera's, they circled the cabin before disappearing into the trees. He felt a chill. Something had been watching them. When he came back inside, Vera was crouched low, her ears pressed back, eyes fixed on the door. It wasn't fear. It was readiness. She knew something he didn't. Days passed, and Ethan began to realize Vera was growing too fast. Her shoulders were already level with his waist. Her claws could cut deep grooves into the wooden floor when she walked. Yet she never hurt him. If anything, she stayed close, following him everywhere. It was almost like she was protecting him. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Vera was not just some wild alien animal. There was an intelligence in her gaze, a sharp awareness that felt almost human. One evening, while tending the fire, Ethan heard a deep, distant roar echo through the forest. Vera froze, then looked at him with wide eyes. Without warning, she moved between him and the door, her tail lashing slowly. The roar came again, closer this time. Ethan's chest tightened. He grabbed his old hunting rifle and checked the chamber. Whatever was coming, Vera was ready to face it. Her muscles were tense, claws digging into the floor, eyes glowing brighter in the dim light. The sound of snapping branches grew louder until it stopped just beyond the cabin. For a long moment, there was silence except for the crackling fire. Then, a heavy thud landed on the roof. Ethan's breath caught. He pointed the rifle upward, but before he could move, Vera let out a sound he had never heard before, a piercing, echoing cry that shook the air. Outside, the thing on the roof hesitated, then leaped away into the trees. Ethan stood frozen, realizing his pet had just scared away something huge. That night, Vera didn't sleep. She sat at the window, watching the forest like a soldier. On guard, Ethan lay in bed, unable to rest. He didn't know what Vera was, or where she came from, But he knew one thing: she wasn't ordinary. And deep inside, he feared that whoever, or whatever, was looking for her would not stop until they found her. The next morning, Ethan found Vera already awake, pacing by the door. Her movements were tense, her eyes scanning the trees beyond. The glass. He stepped outside, rifle in hand, to check for tracks. The mud was disturbed. Deep claw marks, much larger than Vera's, led away into the forest. He could tell whatever it was had come close during the night. Too close. He didn't know if it was hunting her, or him, or both. As the days went by, Vera became more restless. She spent hours sniffing the air, ears twitching, tail swaying in slow arcs. Sometimes she would vanish into the woods and return with fresh cuts or dirt in her fur. Ethan worried she might run off for good, but every time she came back to him, her loyalty felt strange, almost like she had chosen him for something important, something he didn't understand yet. One afternoon, Ethan was cleaning his tools, when Vera suddenly froze and looked toward the sky. Her fur bristled. A low rumble filled the air, growing louder until Ethan saw them, 3 dark shapes cutting across the clouds. They were ships, alien ships, moving slow, scanning the land. Below, his blood went cold. The war was supposed to be over, but he had no doubt these ships weren't here for peace. He grabbed Vera by the collar he had made and pulled her inside. The ships passed overhead, but one of them circled back. A beam of light swept over the forest, and Ethan swore he saw it pause near his cabin before moving on. Vera crouched low, growling deep in her throat. Ethan didn't breathe until the sound of engines faded into the distance. He turned to her, but she was staring at him in a way that made his skin prickle. It was as if she knew exactly what those ships wanted, and it wasn't him. That night, Ethan had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking about the war, about the stories soldiers told of alien predators used in battle, creatures faster, stronger, and smarter than anything humans had ever faced. They were rare, almost mythical, said to be bonded to their masters for life. The most dangerous of all were rumored to belong to the alien royal family. He looked at Vera, sleeping curled by the fire, and wondered if he was starting to put the pieces together. Over the next week, Ethan began to notice more signs of trouble. Tracks in the mud, distant roars, trees with deep claw marks higher than his head. But the strangest thing was how Vera responded. She wasn't afraid, she was preparing. She would patrol the cabin's perimeter like a trained guard. She would sniff at the air, then glance back at him, as if telling him to stay close. Ethan realized she wasn't just surviving out here, she was protecting him, maybe even hiding him from something. Then one evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ethan heard movement outside. It wasn't the heavy steps of a predator. It was lighter, sharper, measured. He peeked out the window and saw them, 3 figures in black armor, their helmets smooth and faceless, moving silently between the trees. His heart pounded. He ducked away from the glass. When he turned back, Vera was already at the door, muscles tense, eyes glowing. She didn't growl this time. She was ready to fight. The soldiers moved closer, scanning the ground. One raised a device that emitted a faint pulse of blue light. Vera let out a low rumbling sound that made the hairs on Ethan's neck stand on end. He reached for his rifle, but she stepped in front of him, blocking his path. It wasn't aggression, it was command. She wanted him to stay back. She would deal with them. Ethan's instincts screamed to stop her, but something about the way she looked at him told him to trust her. Without warning, Vera darted out the door, moving so fast Ethan could barely track her. The soldiers reacted instantly, weapons raised, but she was already on them. The forest lit up with flashes of blue as they fired, but Vera weaved through the blasts, striking with claws and teeth. The sound of armor tearing filled the air. One soldier fell, then another. The last one tried to retreat, but Vera slammed into him, knocking him down. And then silence. She emerged from the trees, her silver fur streaked with dark blood that wasn't hers. Ethan stared at her in shock. She looked at him, breathing hard, and for a moment, he swore there was something in her eyes, pride, maybe even relief. But then she collapsed at his feet, too exhausted to stand. He knelt beside her, checking for wounds. There were none, but her breathing was ragged. She had fought for him, risked her life for him. And deep down, Ethan knew she hadn't done it just out of instinct. She had done it because they were connected now, in a way that went beyond human and alien. As he carried her back inside, a thought kept gnawing at him. If soldiers were here and alien ships were scanning the land, then Vera wasn't just some random creature. She was valuable, dangerous, and somewhere out there, someone powerful was looking for her. Someone who might be willing to burn the entire planet to get her back. Ethan sat by the fire that night, watching Vera sleep. Her breathing had slowed, but she was still weak from the fight. The image of her tearing through trained soldiers wouldn't leave his mind. She moved like she had done it 1,000 times before, each strike precise and calculated. That wasn't the behavior of a wild predator. That was training, military training. And it made him wonder what kind of enemy had he brought into his home without knowing it. In the early morning, Ethan was woken by a faint beeping sound. It wasn't coming from the cabin. It was outside. He grabbed his rifle and stepped into the mist. The forest was quiet, but the sound was clearer now, like a signal. Following it carefully, he found something half buried under leaves, a small, black device with blinking red lights. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. It wasn't human technology. He realized it was a tracker. Someone knew exactly where Vera was. He rushed back inside and checked on her. She was awake now, her golden eyes following his every movement. He held up the tracker, and her fur bristled instantly. She bared her teeth, a low growl vibrating in her chest. Ethan didn't need words to understand she hated this thing, and she knew what it meant. Without hesitation, he smashed it against the floor until the lights went out. But he also knew destroying it wouldn't stop whoever had placed it from coming. For the rest of the day, Vera stayed close, never more than a few steps away from him. Ethan spent hours preparing packing food, checking ammunition, and readying an old off-road truck he had kept hidden in the shed. If someone was coming for Vera, they needed to move. By sunset, the sound of distant engines carried through the forest. Not ships this time. Ground vehicles. And they were coming fast. Ethan opened the truck's door, motioning for Vera to jump in. She hesitated for a moment, scanning the tree line, then leaped onto the passenger seat. He started the engine, the old machine coughing to life. Tires spun in the mud before catching, and they tore down the narrow trail. Behind them, lights appeared between the trees, 3 black armored transports, closing the gap. A voice in Ethan's mind told him there was no way. They would just let him go. Branches whipped against the windshield as the truck roared over rough ground. Vera crouched low, eyes fixed on the pursuing lights. When the first shot hit the side mirror, shattering it into glass dust, Ethan swerved hard, nearly tipping them over. A second shot grazed the truck's tailgate. He pushed the accelerator to the floor. The road ahead split into 2 paths, one leading toward the old highway, the other deeper into the wild hills where no one lived. Without thinking, he turned toward the hills. The ground became rougher, the trail almost disappearing under rocks and fallen trees. The armored vehicles followed but struggled with the terrain. Ethan used the chance to put more distance between them. Still, the chase didn't end until the forest swallowed them completely. Only then did he slow down, pulling under a thick canopy of branches to hide the truck. He cut the engine, and for a moment, the only sound was his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Vera jumped out first, sniffing the air. She moved in wide circles, scanning the shadows. Ethan checked his gear and loaded the rifle again. They were safe for now, but the enemy wouldn't give up. He knew they'd keep searching until they found her. He leaned against the truck, trying to steady his thoughts when Vera suddenly stopped moving. Her head turned slowly, and she stared into the dark with her ears forward. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, a sound answered, a low, drawn-out roar unlike anything had ever heard. Vera's body stiffened, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw something close to fear in her eyes. She stepped back toward him, her tail low, her muscles tight. The roar came again, closer this time. It wasn't the sound of a machine or a human weapon. It was alive. And whatever it was, Vera recognized it. Ethan's grip on his rifle tightened. He wanted to believe they could outrun it, but the look on her face told him the truth. They couldn't run from this one. From between the trees, two glowing red eyes appeared, moving toward them without sound. Then, the massive shape stepped into the faint moonlight, a predator twice Vera's size, with armor like scales and fangs that glistened in the dark. It stopped a few steps away, staring at Vera with unblinking focus. Ethan's breath caught. As the realization hit him, this wasn't just another predator. This was her kind. And by the way it moved, it wasn't here to help. Vera stepped forward slowly, her body low but steady, a deep rumble building in her chest. The larger beast responded with a growl that shook the ground. Ethan didn't move. He knew this was no ordinary meeting between animals. This was a challenge. And from the way they looked at each other, he could tell there was more history between these two than he could ever guess. The two predators circled each other in silence, their muscles coiled like springs. Ethan's rifle felt heavy in his hands, but he didn't dare fire. One wrong move could make the situation worse. Vera's golden eyes locked on the larger beast, and her growl deepened. The other creature's red eyes gleamed as it bared teeth the size of Ethan's fingers. The tension between them felt like it could snap at any moment. The larger beast lunged first, moving with frightening speed. Vera met the charge head-on, their bodies colliding with a crack of force that shook the ground. Claws scraped against armored hide, and snarls filled the air. Ethan tried to track the fight, but they were moving too fast, flashes of silver and black in the moonlight. He saw blood splash onto the dirt, though he couldn't tell whose it was. Every instinct told him to run, but he couldn't leave her. Vera managed to force the larger beast back a few steps, but it was stronger. It slammed her into a tree, the impact rattling branches. Ethan shouted her name, taking a step forward, but she twisted away and struck back with her claws, raking them across the enemy's neck. The red-eyed predator staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it roared loud enough to echo through the forest. That roar wasn't just a challenge, it was a call. Ethan's heart sank when he heard more movement in the distance, heavy steps. More of them were coming. Vera seemed to realize it too. She gave the larger beast one last hard shove and then darted back toward Ethan, snapping her teeth as if to tell him to move. He didn't hesitate. They ran to the truck, the sound of more predators growing closer with every step. The night was alive with the roars of creatures that sounded hungry. They reached the truck, and Ethan slammed the door shut just as a shadow passed in front of the headlights. He turned the key, and the engine coughed to life. Vera was already crouched low in the seat, her gaze fixed out the window. The first of the new predators appeared from the trees, smaller than the red-eyed one, but still large enough to tear the truck apart if they got too close. Ethan pressed the accelerator, the tires spitting mud as they tore away into the hills. For miles they drove without slowing, the forest rushing past in a blur. Eventually, the sounds of pursuit faded, but Ethan didn't relax. He pulled off the trail, parking near a cluster of boulders that hid them from view. The night was quiet again, but he could still feel his pulse racing. Vera's side was bleeding now, a deep cut along her ribs. He dug through his pack, pulling out clean cloth to press against the wound. She didn't resist, only watching him with steady eyes as he worked. When the bleeding slowed, Ethan sat back, trying to piece together what had just happened. Those predators weren't random animals. They had moved with purpose, almost like soldiers, and the way they focused on Vera made it clear she was their target. Not to kill, but to take. That thought chilled him more than anything else. Whoever commanded them wanted her alive. That meant she was worth more than he could imagine. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of voices outside. Human voices. He reached for his rifle and peered through a gap in the rocks. 2 men in tattered uniforms were scanning the area. They looked like scavengers, the kind who picked through battlefields for anything valuable. But the way they moved told him they were looking for something specific. Vera's ears twitched as she listened, her gaze sharpening. Without warning, she slipped out of the truck and vanished into the brush. Ethan swore under his breath and climbed out to follow her. He found her behind a fallen tree, crouched low as the 2 men walked closer. She didn't attack. Instead, she stayed still, her body low, her eyes fixed on one of them. Then Ethan noticed it, the patch on the man's shoulder. It wasn't from any human unit. It was alien. These weren't just scavengers. They were working for someone else. One of the men pulled out a device and spoke into it in a language Ethan didn't understand. Vera's growl vibrated through the ground. She stepped forward slowly, her golden eyes never leaving them. The men froze when they saw her, and for a moment, the air was heavy with tension. Then one of them dropped to one knee and bowed his head. The other followed, pressing a fist to his chest. Ethan's skin prickled. This wasn't fear, it was respect. Vera didn't move closer. She only gave a short, sharp sound that made the men nod quickly before retreating back into the trees. Ethan stood there in stunned silence. Whoever Vera was, she wasn't just some predator the aliens used in war. She was something far higher. And if armed soldiers and deadly creatures were all chasing her, there was only one explanation: she belonged to someone at the very top of their empire. Ethan didn't speak for a long time after the 2 men left. He just stood there, staring at the place where they had disappeared into the forest. Vera moved back to his side, brushing against his leg like nothing unusual had happened. But Ethan couldn't shake the image of those men kneeling to her. He had never seen anyone, human or alien, treat an animal that way. It was the kind of respect soldiers gave to a ruler's heir. Back at the truck, Ethan looked at her carefully. She was still bleeding from the cut along her ribs, though she didn't seem to care. He cleaned the wound again and spoke to her quietly. More to himself than to her. "You're not just any creature, are you?" She tilted her head at the sound of his voice, and for a moment, it almost felt like she understood the question. The more he thought about it, the more the pieces fit together. Vera wasn't just important, she was priceless. By midday, they were moving again, heading deeper into the wild hills where even the military rarely went. Ethan wanted to find somewhere safe, somewhere no tracker could reach. But in the back of his mind, he knew safety was a fantasy. If Vera belonged to the alien leadership, they would never stop hunting for her. And if she truly belonged to the Empress herself, then Ethan wasn't just hiding an animal, he was holding something that could shift the balance of power across the galaxy. That night, Ethan parked the truck in a rocky ravine and set a small fire. Vera lay close, watching the shadows dance on the walls. He was half asleep when he heard it, the faint hum of a voice carried on the wind. It wasn't human. He sat up fast, reaching for his rifle. Vera was already on her feet, ears forward. The voice grew clearer, speaking in a deep, commanding tone. From the darkness, a tall figure stepped into the firelight. The stranger was armored in black and silver, the design unlike any Ethan had seen. Her helmet was smooth, but when she removed it, he saw her face sharp, in human beauty with eyes the same golden color as Vera's. She studied him for a moment before looking down at the predator beside him. Vera's posture changed instantly. Her tail lowered, and she bowed her head slightly. Ethan realized he had never seen her do that for anyone. The woman spoke in the alien tongue, and Vera responded with a low rumble. Ethan couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. This was no reunion between equals. This was a commander speaking to a soldier, or a ruler speaking to what belonged to her. Finally, the woman turned to Ethan and spoke in halting, but clear English. "You have something that is mine." Ethan's grip on the rifle tightened. "She's not yours. She's alive because of me." The woman's eyes narrowed, but she didn't raise a weapon. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice calm but sharp. "You call her Vera. Her true name is Kareth. She is the chosen guardian of the Empress. She was lost in the war. I have been sent to retrieve her." Ethan's mind spun. A guardian of the Empress. That meant Vera wasn't just a weapon, she was tied to the heart of the alien empire itself. He shook his head. "She's not going anywhere with you." The woman studied him in silence, then glanced at Vera. To his surprise, Vera moved to stand between him and the alien, her body low, her eyes locked on the woman's. The meaning was clear. Vera had made her choice. The alien's expression hardened. "You do not understand what you keep. The Empress will not forgive this. Her enemies will burn this planet to the ground to have Kareth in their grasp." Ethan didn't answer. He was too busy hearing the unspoken truth in her words. The aliens weren't the only ones after Vera. Others wanted her too. And if the wrong hands claimed her, it wouldn't just be this planet that suffered. Whole worlds could fall. The woman gave him one last look before stepping back into the shadows. "The hunters will come. And when they do, neither of you will survive." Then she was gone, leaving only the sound of the wind and the crackle of the fire. Ethan sat down slowly, his thoughts tangled in fear and determination. Vera came to his side, resting her head against his shoulder. She had chosen to stay with him, but now he understood the cost. Somewhere far beyond the hills, forces were moving both to reclaim the Empress's lost guardian and to claim her as a weapon for their own. Ethan knew the next time they were found, it wouldn't be a small squad or a lone envoy. It would be an army. And when that happened, he would have to decide whether to protect Vera or let her go to save everything else. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat by the dying fire, watching the dark edges of the ravine. Every crack of a branch made him tighten his grip on the rifle. Vera lay close, her breathing steady, but her ears twitched at every sound. She knew they were being hunted. Not just by the alien Empress's forces, but by whoever else wanted her as a weapon. The envoy's warning played over in Ethan's mind when the hunters came. Neither of them would survive. By dawn, the wind carried a faint vibration, a hum so deep it made the rocks tremble. Ethan stood, scanning the sky, and saw them. 4 alien dropships cutting through the clouds. They weren't scouting this time. They were here to take. The ships spread out in formation, one heading directly for the ravine. Vera rose to her feet, her golden eyes burning with something Ethan had never seen before. Not fear, not rage. Resolve. He grabbed his pack and slung it over his shoulder. "We're not going to outrun them." Vera tilted her head, as if she understood. Then she moved toward the open ground, placing herself between the approaching ship and Ethan. The dropship landed hard, kicking up dust and debris. Its ramp lowered, and a squad of armored soldiers poured out, weapons raised. At their center was a figure Ethan recognized instantly, the red-eyed predator from before. Its gaze locked on Vera, and the air seemed to crackle with tension. The soldiers fanned out, shouting commands in their language. Ethan lifted his rifle, but before he could fire, Vera let out a roar so loud it made the ground vibrate. The red-eyed beast answered with its own, then lunged forward. The two collided in a blur of claws and teeth. The soldiers tried to move in, but Vera fought with a speed and ferocity that kept them back. Ethan fired, dropping 2 soldiers before they could flank her. The dropship's guns whirred to life, and he dove behind a boulder as blasts tore through the ground. The fight between Vera and the red-eyed predator was savage. She was smaller but faster, weaving in and out of its strikes. A deep slash opened along her side, but she didn't slow. She drove her claws into the beast's throat, forcing it back. Then, with a final lunge, she brought it down, her teeth clamping onto its neck until it went still. She stood over the body, blood dripping from her jaws, and the soldiers froze, hesitating. That pause was all Ethan needed. He stepped out from cover and fired a shot that shattered the dropship's control panel, sending sparks and smoke into the air. The soldiers began to retreat, dragging their wounded. But instead of chasing them, Vera turned back to Ethan. Her steps were slow now, her body trembling. He rushed to her side, catching her as she collapsed. "You're all right," he said, though his voice shook. Her golden eyes met his, and for a moment, there was something in them that felt almost human, a connection deeper than words. She had fought for him again, not because of orders, but because she had chosen to. More ships appeared on the horizon. Ethan knew this wasn't over. The forces of the Empress were closing in, and if they reached her, they would take Vera no matter what. He looked at the approaching ships, then back at her. "You can't stay with me," he said quietly. "If you do, they'll never stop coming." She let out a low rumble, pressing her head against his chest as if to say she understood. Then, slowly she stepped back. Ethan reached into his pack and pulled out the last of his supplies: meat, water, and a small beacon he had salvaged from the wreckage of a human fighter. He activated it, sending a single signal into the sky. "This will take you somewhere they can't follow," he whispered. Vera looked at him one last time, her eyes locking with his. Then she turned and bounded into the forest, her silver form disappearing into the mist. He stood there until the sound of her steps faded completely. The ships landed minutes later, soldiers sweeping the area. The envoy from before stepped forward, her golden eyes scanning the ravine. "Where is she?" she demanded. Ethan met her gaze. "Gone, and if you're smart, you'll stop looking." The envoy studied him for a long moment, then turned away. Without another word, the soldiers boarded their ships and lifted off. Soon, the sky was empty again. Ethan was alone now. The forest was quiet, but the silence felt heavy. He knew he might never see Vera again. But he also knew she was alive, somewhere far beyond the reach of the Empress and her enemies. She was free. And maybe one day, if the galaxy was lucky, the guardian of the Empress would choose to return, not as a weapon of war, but as the protector of those she called her own.